This presentation will focus on non-herbicide weed management strategies for the control of large crabgrass and specialty crops. I am Meredith Melendez, County Agricultural Agent with Rutgers Cooperative Extension in Mercer County. And I'm joined today by Terry Bensacone, our Extension Specialist in Specialty Crop Weed Management. Thanks for joining me today, Terry.
You're very welcome, Meredith. Hello, everyone.
Terry and I were fortunate to receive USDA Specialty Crop Block Grant funding to assist specialty crop growers with non-herbicide weed control strategies. The grant objectives were to identify the top 5 weed species of concern for no-spray and organic farms, develop decision-making resources for the 5 identified weeds, provide ecology-based weed management trainings, provide resources online, and evaluate OMRI-approved herbicides for weed management. Based on an online survey that we conducted in 2018 to determine the priority weed management species needs of specialty crop growers, we found that the top 5 species were yellow nutsedge, Canada thistle, large crabgrass, smooth pigweed, and hairy galansoga. These weed species are the focus of our decision tool fact sheet publications and recorded presentations like this one. Large crabgrass is an annual weed found across the state. Because large crabgrass can form deep root systems, crops can be outcompeted for moisture, particularly in areas where there is infrequent tillage. As seen in these pictures, large crabgrass seedling leaves open up parallel to the ground from the main stem. As this stem grows, the plant becomes erect with the leaves still running parallel.
Meredith, can you get back to the previous slide? I just want to make a quick comment regarding this crabgrass seedling. So what you see on the picture on the right are really recently emerged seedling of crabgrass. And actually, that's probably the best stage for controlling crabgrass. At this stage, the seedling will be extremely sensitive to tilling, any kind of mechanical action that will unroot the seedlings. If you plan to use any kind of organic herbicide, that's the stage at which you want to apply this herbicide because you have very few leaves, because the growing point of the plant may be a little bit more exposed than in a mature plant. The herbicide should be efficient at this stage. If you wait a little bit too long, and if you wait until what you see on the left picture, the herbicide will not be so efficient, mostly because the growing point of the crabgrass is well protected deep into the plant, protected by multiple layers of leaves. These herbicides are essentially contact herbicides. They will be burning what they are touching. And if the growing point of the crabgrass is protected, this herbicide will not be working. So I think it's worth mentioning that, Meredith, for really optimizing crabgrass control, the stage at which you're controlling the plant is really the stage of the plant at which you're controlling it is really important.
No, that's a great point, Terry, right? Sooner rather than later in terms of management will make things easier in the long run. So some of the features of large crabgrass, right? You'll find that the leaves will have hairs on both the upper and lower sides of the leaves. And once the plant has 4 to 5 true leaves, it'll begin to produce tillers, which you see in the right-hand picture. These tillers are shoots that'll grow out from the base of the stem, and they will continue to elongate as long as that plant is alive. So throughout the growing season. These tillers will have nodes along them, and each node is capable of producing roots, which you can also see in the picture. These tillers allow the crabgrass to spread and producing a dense root system. And these root systems are really what facilitates the ability of large crabgrass to be able to outcompete some of our specialty crops in the field. The tiller nodes, if they're separated from the main stem, if there are roots there, then it can produce a new plant on its own and continue to survive. So large crabgrass will spread through tiller production as well as seed production, and then is ultimately killed by hard frost, with those seeds being viable for several years in the soil.
Meredith, yes. Yeah. Just a comment regarding tillering on the production of roots at the node. That's clearly, when you look at this picture, you can clearly imagine that if you want to control crabgrass, when it started tearing and producing new roots, it will be extremely difficult because the plant has capacity to absorb nutrients more efficiently because there is more roots. If you're starting to try to kill it either mechanically or with herbicide, you will not be successful because the plant has this capacity of absorbing nutrients because it has many more roots than it was, than at the seedling stage. So really, again, I mean, I said it before, but the seedling stage is essentially the best time for really controlling crabgrass weed. If you're waiting too long, yes, you will have to deal with something which has a lot of roots, many shoots, larger leaf surface, and that will not be something really good if you really want to efficiently control it, either with mechanical control or organic herbicides.
Yeah, those tillers really provide an advantage for the crabgrass over anything else that's in the field. So large crabgrass thrives in environments where there's bare ground, so there's nothing competing with it, a lack of soil disturbance, so those roots are allowed to grow as they want. It prefers full sun environments. It does very well with high temperatures. Again, with competition, right? It doesn't like to be in densely planted cropping areas because of that competition. And it prefers perennial cropping systems where you have less tillage and less disturbance of the soil. Crabgrass does not like dense shading, soil disturbance and cultivation, and cooler temperatures. And again, it's killed at the end of the season, usually with the first hard frost.
On Meredith, regarding shading, crabgrass has some tolerance to shading. But if you're really able to put a thick layer of mulch, either straw, pine bark, if you're really blocking most of the light, crabgrass will really not like it. It's not one of these weeds that will survive very well if you're putting a dense cover crop, a dense mat of straw or pine bark over the top of the soil.
Right, yeah, and that's why one of the recommendations is a spring-killed cover crop, right, to provide that matting and prevent those
definitely
from becoming.
On soil disturbance. Again, I mean, I really want to stress out the need for soil disturbance. It's essentially working if you're able to do soil disturbance at the seedling stage. If you're waiting too long, that will not be efficient. So soil disturbance cultivation, that's really an efficient strategy if you're adapting it really at the stage of the weed. If you really need to do that at the seedling stage.
Timing is everything.
Exactly.
Yeah. So some cropping considerations for farms. So scout for early season detection of seedlings. So be aware of where those seedlings are coming up and have a plan on how you're going to deal with those seedlings in a timely fashion. Right. So thinking about cultivation to disrupt their growth so they don't develop those tillers and more extensive root systems, and certainly not producing seed. Cultivate crabgrass populations before roots start to form at those tiller nodes. Plant cash crops that can handle repeated cultivation in the infested areas, right? So thinking about, can you get in there? Can these crops handle cultivation? Can the roots withstand that? Or are you going to cause crop damage by particular crops where you're doing cultivation at the roots? Clean your equipment to prevent spread of seed across the farm. That's a very common way of spreading crabgrass throughout a farm environment from an area where seed was able to be produced into other areas. Conduct early season cultivation of fallow fields for at least the 4 to 6 weeks of the summer. So really trying to handle those seedlings that pop up in those fallow areas rather than letting that field go fallow and then becoming a source of seed for your farm for the crabgrass. And then use early spring cover crops that are terminated in mid-June, right, to allow you to form a mulch that can prevent seedling emergence in the spring.
Meredith, just a quick comment regarding crabgrass emergence. We are here at Rutgers for a research project involving several universities in the Northeast region, and we are looking at what is the timing of emergence for some major weed species, including crabgrass? After 3 years of investigating weed emergence, we really observed that crabgrass is mostly emerging, is starting to emerge by late April, early May. Most of the emergence will occur in May up to early June. And by mid-June, you will really have low crabgrass emergence. Later in the season, you will start looking at other weed species, other grasses, such as goosegrass, emerging late in the season. But I would say that for us in New Jersey, crabgrass has emergence is mostly focused in May and June. And that's really the time of the year when you need to focus on your scouting for detecting crabgrass. On any kind of cover crop that you may have in place at this time of the year would be really beneficial, because crabgrass emergence, again, it's mostly emerging in May and June.
Yeah, so maybe we should say on this slide, instead of terminated in mid-June, it should say by mid-June.
Yeah, by mid-June, yeah.
Yeah, but then thinking too, cover crops are typically densely planted, so it's going to give that shading also. Yeah, so okay, well, that's a great point, Terry. And I wonder too, if that period of emergence of the seedlings has changed as our season has gotten warmer earlier each year, right? So that's going to impact the timing of emergence of our weed seeds also.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something, right now we still have experimentation in place. Right now we are in late July in New Jersey, really warm temperature. We don't see crabgrass emergence. We have not seen crabgrass emerging spray since early July. But I think, with maybe warmer spring, we may have crabgrass starting to emerge a little bit earlier, probably by mid-April, depending on the year. So that's something. Start to keep an eye on crabgrass by mid-April.
Okay. So we decided to prioritize farm activities based by season in order to reduce and remove large crabgrass populations from production areas, right? So prioritizing which activities need to happen when, based on the life cycle of large crabgrass. So during the winter, management of existing crabgrass populations should be considered when planning your crop locations, crop rotations, fallow fields, and cover cropping. So where have you historically or the year prior had an issue with crabgrass? And what are some of the strategies that you can employ to help manage those? If this has been a multi-year process for you, you certainly want to think about what has worked in the past, assessing if anything worked more successfully than others, and maybe consider including some different strategies that you haven't tried before. And certainly consider equipment that you're using for varying crops. Where are they moving across the farm? And are any of those areas reservoirs for crabgrass seed based on emergence that you've seen in previous years? So really thinking about, do you need to clean equipment as it's being moved or used across the farm? Because these seeds will be plentiful in the soil in areas where you have had crabgrass that's gone to seed in the past. If you aren't sure if it went to seed, right? If you've got crabgrass emergence there, then crabgrass has probably gone to seed there in the past. So really thinking about making sure you're not transporting seed across the farm. During the spring, we still want to focus on cleaning equipment, so we're not transporting the seed across the farm. We want to plant spring crops as early as possible and using as dense of planting as possible for that crop to hopefully get some shading going on in areas where you have large crabgrass. Make sure that we're terminating cover crops to help us prevent that seedling emergence through mulching. Regularly cultivate fallow fields, specifically during the first 4 to 6 weeks of spring, to disturb any seedlings that have come up. Use your short season crop rotations to increase cultivation in the field and potentially shade out with those crops any of those large crabgrass populations. Use repeated cultivation and hand weeding on young seedlings as well as these plants begin to mature. So that way we're getting to them before they're tillering and certainly before they produce seed. And continue to monitor populations throughout the season. Keep an eye on them, pay attention to the size, as well as evaluate the strategies that you've put in place.
Meredith, two quick comments regarding the strategies that you can apply in spring. The first one is, do not just focus monitoring within the field. Look at what's going on in the neighborhood. Crabgrass, it's a very common weed. It's present in many habitats. So you really want to look at what's going on around the field as well. And if you have to use mowing, just not focus your mowing within the field, but also you may have to start mowing around the field as well, in the ditches, on banks, and any fallows that you may have around the field. So that's an important point. The other one is that when the plants start tearing, you will really have lower success controlling it by tilling, by tilling the soil, by cultivating the soil. So really mowing later in the season is a good strategy to really prevent seed formation. Do not allow this weed to start forming seed. Crabgrass can tolerate mowing. It will survive, but as long as you can prevent the plant to form seed head, you will reduce the seed bank in the future. You will prevent replenishment of the seed bank by mowing regularly plants that have already been established for a while.
Yeah, thanks for talking about mowing, Terry. I did realize I skipped over that one. And it's an important strategy. And certainly, if you can't get labor out into the area to deal with it by pulling it out.
And it's a strategy which is working with crabgrass, because crabgrass is usually forming relatively tall seed head. And I've not seen crabgrass really well adapted to forming a very small seed head that will, that will form even if you're mowing. Goosegrass, on the opposite, can form very small seed head on the plant. Okay, goosegrass, even if you keep mowing it on a regular basis, you may have small seed heads forming on the plant. With crabgrass, if you keep mowing on a regular basis, you will really prevent the formation of seed heads, and you will prevent to replenish the seed banks.
So during the summer months, we'll want to make sure that we're, again, focusing on our equipment and making sure we're not transporting seed across the farm. Make sure that we're still monitoring our fields for large crabgrass populations, and get in there and mow any mature plants, as we talked about already, to prevent that seed formation. Certainly hand weed mature plants if you're able to commit to labor for that. But really focusing on making sure that you don't have large crabgrass plants that are allowed to produce seed, and certainly continue to monitor those populations and problem solve, right? Have those critical thoughts about how is it ending up here? What am I doing now? What can I do in addition to what I'm already doing to manage it?
On Meredith, the critical thinking here too is that monitoring is critical, because yes, you have less emergence of crabgrass in the summer, because it's really a plant which tends to emerge really in spring and very early summer. But you may have other weeds. I mentioned goosegrass. Goosegrass will keep emerging during the entire summer. So it may be worth looking at some of these other grass species that may be troublesome as well. So monitoring is not something just for when the weed is critical. You just, in many situations, you just don't have crabgrass. You may have other weed species such as goosegrass that may be a problem. So keep monitoring in the summer as well.
So during the fall, right, we're still talking about making sure equipment's clean, hand removal of mature plants, or mowing in these cases as well to prevent that seed formation, and certainly monitoring those problems and problem solving.
And especially in fall, Meredith, that's a good time for mapping actually areas where you got maybe a lot of seed production that you are not able to control. If you're able to determine which areas where you have a lot of seed of goosegrass, of crabgrass seed production, that will give you some indication of where you may want to focus your attention the following year. So it's monitoring, but fall, I think mapping your crabgrass in fall is really a good idea, because that will help you focusing where you need it the following year.
Yeah, and I think in addition to mapping, sometimes taking pictures can be really helpful in terms of when you're thinking in the wintertime about strategies for crop rotations, taking pictures of the problems in the field as a reminder to yourself later on when everything's a blur.
yes, definitely. And on the advantage too, that taking picture, sometimes grasses are never easy to identify. Okay, it's not easy. If you can take picture in fall of when the plant have started, forming seed head, when they are completely mature plant, if you can take picture of the seed head, that will help you to determine which species you're dealing with, or to confirm that you're really dealing with good grass. If you have any doubt, we are here as extension specialists and county extension agents. We are here to help you with identifying these grasses as well.
So farmers should be basing management decisions in terms of controlling large crabgrass on their monitoring observations and previous management experiences. So thinking about those pictures or any notes that you took, or, record keeping can be helpful, right? In remembering what you did when, and then coming up with a strategy for the next season. And we understand it's hard. There's already a lot on the to-do list, but prioritizing what are your biggest issues on the farm, what's going to be worthy of your time in terms of management and in terms of cataloging what you've done so that you can make smarter decisions in the next season. But some questions to ask yourself about large crabgrass is where are these on the farm? What is the size of the population? How has that evolved over time? And what do you think were the factors that led to this, right? So as Terry said earlier, right, large crabgrass is a common weed. We know it's all over the place. It's on roadsides, it's in neighboring properties, right? So do you think it came from there? Do you think you brought it in on equipment? Did it come in plant material, right? It can come in many different ways, and you might not ever have the answer as to all of the answers to what led to the population that you have on your farm. But think too about, cropping rotations and has that impacted the infestations, especially in those more low management crops that aren't densely planted, where maybe that seedling population was allowed to get a foothold onto the field because you weren't doing activities that would have disrupted that. What are you already doing to help suppress the population? What are some additional strategies that you could do in the coming season? Really having a long-term plan on dealing with this weed, right? So it's multiple years of planning rather than thinking it's going to be all handled in one particular year. And then when you're using cultivation, right, thinking about potential organic matter loss from that cultivation and making sure that you're improving the soils to build up and replenish that organic matter. So to review, the earlier you start management of large crabgrass on your farm, the smaller the population will be that you have to manage over time. Some key management strategies include using cultivation to manage seedlings after emergence and before tillers form. Employ equipment cleaning procedures to not spread seed across the farm. Plant short season crops with rapid rotations to manage seedling emergence through cultivation in the spring. Cultivate fallow fields multiple times in the spring to disturb the seedlings that emerge. And remove established plants before they produce seed, or at least mow them in order to prevent the seed head from forming.
On something important to consider too, Meredith, is really rotation, crop rotation. Any crop that can be established at very densely early in spring will be a good competitor against crabgrass. So that's important to consider as well. Also, crabgrass seedlings, well, not seedlings, but seeds. Crabgrass seed are they are not they will not last for a long period of time in the soil. They may survive in the soil for 2 to 3 years. They will not last very long. So if you can implement strategies in areas that are heavily infested with crabgrass, if you can have rotation with a crop which is giving you a dense stand early in spring, after quite a few years, you should be really improving crabgrass control drastically by doing that.
Thanks, Terry. Thank you all for listening to this presentation. As a reminder, you can view presentations on other priority weed species on our Weed Management YouTube page, accessible through the QR code shown here. Decision tool fact sheets are also posted with each companion video in the description portion of the video and on the Rutgers NJAES Publications website. Each resource will be published once they are completed, and all of them should be available by September 30th, 2022. Thanks again for joining us today.